First off, thank you everyone for coming and hearing this today. We're excited. We think it's a great topic, great discussion. So I am going to let them each introduce themselves and talk about what they're doing now, and if you want to talk about what game you might be playing right now.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Leifer. I am a VIP manager. I do VIP marketing and player support and management at Product Madness. We are a social casino application, Heart of Vegas. And I guess my favorite game right now, I'm pretty old school. I like Candy Crush.
My name's Jamison Selby. I'm the VP of Games at B-Spot in Los Angeles. We are a real money gambling operator, doing new things with real money gambling and games. So your favorite game? I'm still deep into Fallout 4, that, and then running around neighborhoods with my son, who is now deep into Pokemon Go.
Oh, I've been spared that one so far. Oh, gosh. I'm Charles Harper. I work for Partis Solutions. We are an advisory consultancy. We're helping out social casinos, real money, iGaming casinos, land-based casinos, and basically trying to help connect the dots and all of those things. Prior to that, I ran business development at Double Down. And prior to that, way too many years in casual gaming than I want to admit to. It was a wonderful time, but I don't want to admit how early I started that. And my favorite game right now is basically anything my kids are playing, because if I want to play and get any time on the Xbox, it's going to be joining them. So it's been Assassin's Creed lately, actually, the new one. So that's what I've been playing.
All right, thanks guys. So just to give you an idea of what my thoughts were putting this session together, coming from the land-based casino world, I think that we've done VIP really, really well. And it's one of the things that casinos have done well. And we definitely know how to use that 80-20 rule, take care of that high end of the database, and really move the needle of revenue. And is that being adapted in social casino or social games in general? So I think that today it's going to be very discussion-based and a lot of different perspectives as to what these guys have seen work, or maybe what we think will work. And of course, we'll open it up to questions at the end. So I'll let you all kind of jump in, but I'll start maybe with somebody first on each question. So I'm going to start with Charles on this one. Tell me a little bit about your work or your exposure in VIP, whether in your current clients or the company that you work for, and what are you seeing as far as usage of these programs or an evolution of these programs?
Without naming names, I would say sort of universally what I've been seeing, and this is part of why I was very interested in being on this panel, especially with this group, is not a lot of attention paid to any kind of formal VIP program in social casino. Some social casinos do it. Most that I've come across really don't. There's some lip service to it. Let me give you an example. I was talking with a social casino recently, and they said, oh, we totally have this great VIP program. When a VIP sends us any kind of customer service contact, those ones go right to the top, and we make sure that we handle them right away. And I said, great, okay, so let's keep them happy. What are you proactively doing to keep them happy? And they were, well, that. And that was kind of the gist of what they were doing. And I said, well, what about any kind of multiple programs, buy programs, anything like that? And they were like, yeah, we've been meaning to get to that. So that's been my experience, which is that it's not being really heavily utilized. And considering, well, here's my theory on it. So much of the revenue comes from so few players. I think there's a genuine fear that if they mess with them or rock the boat at all, that they're going to lose huge chunks of revenue anytime they lose a player. And if it's working right now, it's going to keep working. And I think there's a genuine fear to really rock that boat and try to disrupt those players in any way. So that's a theory. I haven't had a lot of discussions with people, but observing a number of social casinos and not social casinos, even social games groups that are doing non-casino type work, I've sort of seen that. So I'm very interested to sit and discuss this with this panel from that point of view.
Do you guys feel that you are less likely to rock the boat with those players? Or I know that, Heart of Vegas is a little more proactive, so.
Yeah, so our program has evolved a lot in the 2 years that I've been with Product Madness, and I think that when I first came on, it was really very support focused, like you're saying. But as our game has become more sophisticated, we've also, and as I've been able to establish relationships with VIPs, we've been able to be a lot more focused on individual people. Not just in relationships and in speaking with them and communicating with them personally, but also in giving them a more specialized experience in the game. Something that, giving them, if maybe access to content before our general population or something like that. But it would be something specific to that particular player. So we've been able to get a lot more proactive and a lot more sophisticated with how we manage these kind of players.
Jamison, do you think that the real money players have different behaviors, or are we kind of talking to the same people with the same message?
Lord, the real money players, pardon me, have very different play patterns and very different expectations. And real money players who have played for real money in land-based, which is the majority of players certainly in the U.S., they have very specific expectations. There's an entire cottage industry around manipulating casino comps, to give yourself the best experience and to give yourself the most time of device and make just overall create an enjoyable experience for you, so people know what to expect. And there's a cost at the land-based operators if you fall down on the job. If your VIP, club starts to wane, or your comps aren't as good as the casino next door, you can lose people. So they come in with those expectations before they even arrive, I think, at least in land-based.
That actually brings up a really good point, and having that mirror to the land-based world. Are you specifically now using a tiered rewards program, and do you think that there's benefits to that, and how does that help with player expectations?
I think absolutely. For us, we've seen, we're rolling in VIP whale programs into the old structure that we had all built out in early games for community management, right? You're developing a community, you're building it out, you're giving concentration to VIP players, and I think the first thing we do is have a discussion about what that means, right? I don't think that a VIP player is just a high-paying whale. I think you need to define what a VIP player is for you. We were talking about this. What is a VIP player? For some companies, I think a VIP player, the status comes in the second there's a payer. Or you can even track VIP players based on things beyond spend. That was the mistake that a lot of companies made early on. Some people are trying to rectify that now, is looking at the actual social value of certain players. That goes back to early MMOs and the earliest guilds and some of the first mass community group payers, right? And studying that, people realize that sometimes the most valuable player in a guild who actually generated the most action was not the biggest spender. It was just someone, for whatever reason, who had a social linchpin and ended up driving spend across a large group. So I think it's really important to define what you mean by VIP.
Definitely operating in this space with social media being what it is, I think they call them influencers on social media, and I definitely think there's game influencers as well. There's people that bring people to your game, and do they not deserve some kind of reward? And you had started a concierge program, right? And what is the difference between your VIPs and maybe your concierge?
So we do have, we do also have a tiered system. So we have a loyalty program in the game where, once you sign in, you're part of our loyalty program that's tiered. A lot of games have this. We also have, as part of our VIP program for our whales, for our spenders, not just spenders, but engaged players, like you're saying. The focus of our VIP program isn't revenue, isn't sales. Obviously that's where we're all going, but really what we focus on is that loyalty, is that building relationships and building loyalty. And so as we move up with our players, we have our VIP program, where people, I will actually reach out to players personally, and then we have kind of like our sort of our dolphins, right, where we would like to provide them with a higher level of reward, but maybe not to the point of the VIP, and we can also, I can touch more players in that way with the tiered rewards.
I just think that's fascinating. The fact that, I mean, how many games have VIP programs where there's actual personal contact between the company and the players? And that type of, that's a very unusual, and I think very, very unique way to keep those high players engaged.
Have you always been proactive in the reach out, or did you start kind of with the communication and, like Charles mentioned, like escalating customer service calls and just kind of having players request versus reaching out to them and offering first?
It is a little bit of both. I mean, definitely we try and escalate, all of our engaged players. Their support tickets should rise to the top. But there is definitely, there's a lot of outreach. Players don't know that I'm there until I reach out. So it's all based on outreach. And then it's my job to establish that relationship so that when they do have a question or when they do need something, they feel comfortable to reach out to me.
And I think that's important. That's where we built loyalty on the land-based side, is having that connection and having people want to come to that property because they felt that there was something more than just that slot machine or that table, that there was somebody that they were coming to visit, me. Every time they made a trip to Vegas. So that kind of, rolls into a fun question maybe of, tell me about a fun whale experience that you've had. And I think since Steph does it day to day, we'll start with her.
Well, I've had quite a few, and it's interesting. Christina and I have talked about some of her stories with her whales and her VIPs when she was in Vegas at a casino. And my relationship with my VIPs isn't quite the same because it's not in person. It's more of a pen pal kind of relationship. So, but we've had some really. I've had VIPs send baked goods, homemade baked goods to the office. I've put VIPs on the phone with our developers so that our developers can get a much clearer picture of what that player perspective is. We've really tried to bring them in and make them a part of the game so that they feel that this is a place for them.
And put a face to it. Mm-hmm. With some of your clients, Charles, have you had them do something outrageous for a player?
It's interesting. I actually do not have a single cool VIP story. What I can say is, for instance, at my time at Double Down, and I'm not giving away any trade secrets here, we had a couple of VIPs that were such large spenders that we started actually doing sort of more proactive things, but that wasn't a systemic or that wasn't a planned event. It was somebody generally more in customer service, which was also sort of doubled as our community management at the time, just sort of wanting to do nice things, and we'd ask them their opinions and send them access to things and that sort of thing. But it was very piecemeal. What I find interesting is in the companies that I've been working with in the broader sense, there's not a lot of even formal community management, which I find kind of distressing, actually. When retention is one of the biggest focuses of any online free-to-play type game, then at the same time, then retention needs to be as well, which I think everybody would agree with. It's much less expensive to retain a player than to get a new one, et cetera, et cetera. And yet, if you said, who's in charge of community management, I think they'd say, well, it kind of depends on the product because it's really the product manager. But then if you think about it, the product manager doesn't really have much one-to-one communication with anybody who would fall under the heading of VIP. So I guess I would count that as not really community management. So again, it's sort of, there's a huge amount of opportunity there for that kind of thing, but I don't, and because there's so much opportunity, I don't really have a great story of, getting baked goods. We never got baked goods. I don't know what's up with that. You're doing something right, I guess.
Sorry.
It's rather questionable too. I don't know if I would eat something sent to them through the mail, right? So, not to date you here, Jamison, but you've been around the block, couple blocks, right? In gaming. You have to have a cool story. You have to have something, right?
I'll go back to some hybrid stuff. When years ago we had a Facebook platform that we used to drive virtual and physical traffic, at a company called Social Type, and we built out VIP programs for online games like Entropy Universe, and for cruise lines, and for all kinds of companies, including Stations Casino. And we built out a tiered reward system that would allow players to get all kinds of cool prizing, free tickets, free meals, basically putting up all the comps that they could get, because we thought, oh cool, we know what they're going to want. And what we found over the course of time is we really didn't know what they actually valued. And it took us a long time working with people to find out that the things that we actually assigned a high dollar amount to, that we assumed, okay, they're going to love this, front row seats, and people are like, that cost us a lot of money to offer that. I'm like, yeah, but they're going to love it. Yeah, okay, but they can buy that.
Right.
Right, somebody can buy that. The stuff that they actually valued the most was the stuff that they couldn't buy, the stuff that we could offer up that was unique, things like a private poker table for you and 10 of your friends, where we'll treat you like a king and let you treat your friends like a king. That didn't cost us anything, but the players all thought it did. So that was my favorite thing, was figuring out that we really had no idea what the players actually valued.
And then the best things, the best experiences are actually the free ones. And anybody who's heard me talk about this topic has probably heard this story, but if you haven't, when I was in the land-based world, I had a local player. She was $1 million video poker player. And she was very loyal to those local casinos, not to mention names. I wasn't at a local, and so we knew of her. We wanted to get her. Research, she's a huge NASCAR fan. We had an autograph signing with probably half a dozen drivers, but she was in love with Casey King, just loved Casey King. Line out the door for this autograph signing. So we've already paid these drivers, we already know what their turn is, because we have all these people coming in already. But for her, we put a chair right next to Casey King, and she got to sit there for 2 hours while he signed autographs. And from that interaction, she came back, and she was my monthly moneymaker. Like, she met my theoretical every month, and it was great. And she was just so appreciative of that. And it cost us nothing more to do it. So,
I was going to say, can you imagine in games, in this world, a campaign, a concentrated campaign to get a single targeted player? Not en masse, but to say, I want that guy, him, he's going to join our game. We're going to research him and figure out how to get him because we've assigned a ridiculous value. I think that, I've never heard of anyone doing that, outside of land-based.
Well, they might
it's
now.
possible?
They might.
Is it possible?
I think it's certainly possible. Why not? I think you just have to figure out how do you value it? How do you decide that you want a particular person? I mean, people down in LA will do it with celebrities, right? But it's really just a marketing play. They're just trying to get a celebrity to play their game so they can put up a photo of them playing their game. They haven't really given a thought like, wow, would it really be cool if like Ashton Kutcher became a clan leader? Would he really do that? For all you know, he might already be. You might not even know it.
But it really is. It's those intangibles that creates that affinity. It's the relationships. It's the things that they can't buy.
Right. So Charles, do you have any clients that are kind of creating unique touch points, making experiences, or do you have maybe any thoughts or insights into what unique touch points there could be? What could we be doing?
Well, I mean, certainly anybody that we have access to and that we talk to, we say, the continuum works like this, folks. If you have great content, you have retention. If you have retention, you have monetization. So figure out how to do that. And oh, by the way, while that whole continuum is going on, retention has to be on both ends of that as well. So there are people out there right now, and again, I can't name names, who are starting to put in place much more astringent, or that's the wrong word, much more, and formal is the wrong word too, but they're getting more programmatic about community management. They're getting more programmatic about creating levels. And what seems to sort of be still a little bit in the oven and not quite baked is, what do you do for those people? And every client's got, and every social casino that I talk to, they've all got kind of different ideas around that. What I find interesting is to get out of the social casino world and the iGaming world and everything else is, what about just sort of more traditional casual gaming. I mean, it's sort of the same idea. If you're, Wild Tangent, there's people who are buying large amounts of coins, or if you're, somebody else, and in some ways, what I've been seeing is those kinds of organizations are actually better at managing the community and put more effort and more resources in the form of people into that than even the social casinos that I've been doing business with. The social casinos rose so quickly and so profitably. I think now that they're sort of, up at a level where they're like, wait, we have to be concentrating more on hanging on to people. So I'm seeing that more starting to happen. The other thing that I'm definitely seeing is that, as they're stratifying, they're also looking at, and this was certainly a focus for everybody, I think, which is, okay, it's great, the 80-20 rule is great, I'm getting, all of my revenue from this top layer, but, and this was certainly a focus of ours, you've got to continue to push that down, though, because I think everybody would rather get $1 from 1,000 players than $1,000 from one player, from the standpoint of that retention issue, right? Which it starts getting really scary when all of your revenue is coming from a small group, and like you were talking about earlier, a single person dies or stops playing or loses their internet connection or whatever it is, and all of a sudden you actually feel that.
It's like dying when you lose your internet connection.
Yeah.
I think that from the land-based perspective, players dying, that's what happens, and it is hard to like constantly fill the funnel and have that same 20% creating revenue and moving the needle, right? So I think Jamison, you can kind of really explain to maybe the group about dolphins and setting up gaming expectations for those dolphins, right? Players are very savvy. And I think that we've not done a great job of kind of saying, if you want this, you have to do this. And we did it in land-based, right? And that's how we move the needle. So
I think, land-based made an absolute specialty of defining player value, from the true whales all the way down to, just really good, solid players, in minnows. But then there's also the great unwashed, right, who just fill up the majority of the casinos, so that nobody pays any attention to. One of the advantages that the games world has is mass data, right? You can segment players into levels and tiers at a group beyond anything that any organizations have ever been able to do. And I think you have to do that. On some level, we've seen making things visible, going back to the early days of, taking some of the base elements of games, levels, experience, leveling up. The aspirational nature of moving from one game tier to another, what that means to have a 10th level character versus a 5th, what it means to see the max level above you and to know that you can get there. I mean, to some level, that's the same thing if you walk down a casino floor and you pass the blackjack tables and there's like a $500 minimum table that is in the middle of the floor and it sits there empty 99% of the time. Why is that there? It's aspirational. It gets you to spend more money even though you're not going to play that table. The true high roller tables aren't even on the floor. You're never going to see them. But that table is there. It's a tier. You can see it. You can aspire to it. It can motivate people to spend money. And I think we can do the exact same thing in the game world, right? You can see what's coming. To do that, you have to be able to really define what player value is to you. You have to know what they value, because that's going to be your tiers. If your levels aren't really meaningful to the players, they're not going to care, right? It just becomes a grind.
Right.
You have to make it something they want to do, something that they value, something that they can share and boast about and feel good about.
So I get what you're saying, and I hear what you're saying, and I definitely think that there's some level of maybe personalization that needs to take place, and I'm going to wow everyone with my lexicon here of data science people are telling me that personalization might be a little bit too hard. Something about machine learning. Is this what we're finding? Can we get personalized? Can we find out what you like versus what she likes?
Let me touch on that one. I don't know that you need to go down to the individual level until you start looking at individual whales and things like that. But when you're looking at, let's just call it that whole middle class, people who are either spending but at a lower level or likely to spend, segmenting, what you're talking about, I think that's enough. I mean, I don't think you need to segment down to, nearsighted guys in Oklahoma who live on 5 acres or more, who drive a Ford. But, you can segment down to behaviors that matter to you, and that, certainly with today's tools, is not difficult to do. When you're dealing with 1 million players a day versus, whatever a physical casino is dealing with, you kind of have to do that. Not to mention the fact I don't think you're going to be losing much until they bubble up to the level that they're sending you cookies, right? I mean, then I think it's perfectly reasonable to be dealing with them on an individual basis. But segmentation, having the analytical tools to even do that well, seems to be somewhat challenging for a lot of the companies out there, not because they don't have the wherewithal or the resources, they just haven't quite gotten to it yet. And a lot of that is just, some of them are doing it really, really well. Some of them are using good third-party tools, and some of them are doing some hybrid right now. What's interesting is the land-based casinos that are also running social casino often don't have particularly great analytics, which is weird for them, but they seem to be accepting of it. And that's the part I can't quite figure out is you would never accept this level of analytics on your floor. Why are you accepting that on the digital side?
On your customers.
Yeah.
Right? And I can
not
definitely
to mention
speak to that.
the ability to even connect those two.
Right.
Right. This is a top social casino player. Are they a VIP on the other side? Yeah, that's a good question.
You don't know. And I think land-based draws a lot of assumptions and conclusions. Everybody that's ever been to Vegas has received that 6x9 card in the mail, right? That has all this glossy picture on it, and it costs so much money to print. And we sent it to you, and we are telling you about a slot tournament and a concert for Diana Ross, or just your weekend getaway, your quarterly offer. And all of these things are on the same mailer, and somebody responds to the code, and that's what casinos use as their data point to say, well, that person loves slot tournaments. That's not the case. That's when he had vacation, and that's when he came out to, play. Nothing to do with a slot tournament. In fact, if you look at his history, he's a blackjack player. But that's what they used as their data point. And so I think that from a land-based perspective, using a social casino platform, there's so much more that they can do, that they should be doing, should be learning from. But knowing that, Stephanie, you talk to people on a more personal basis now, do you think that you found out more of those details in your conversations, or from whatever data the company's collecting for you?
Well, our data is mostly based on their in-game behaviors. It's about how they play. It's about how they like to play, maybe how long they like to play, or something like that. We have so much data on their behavior in the game. We don't get any feel for them outside the game until we do make that outreach. There's some very basic demographic information that we have, but we know demographics don't always point to how someone plays. A 25-year-old woman might play the exact same way as a 60-year-old man, and it's not about where they live necessarily or how old they are, but so we can find and sort of synthesize what they like in the game and where they want to go, what they might like next in the game. But as far as personal information and getting anything more granular, that is done on a one-on-one basis.
Okay. So we've talked a lot about social casino. We're in the casino track, makes sense. But I think that an important takeaway is, doesn't this span across genre, not just casual, but all genres, right? I think that, I don't know how much that top person is playing on Game of War, but I heard it's a lot of money. And I'm gonna assume it's a he. What does he get, if anything? I'll let you take it, James.
Out of the top, what does that player get?
Should he get something?
That player probably gets a lot of money, actually, if he's the top player. The games like that have, besides, if you're talking about games that have an online community, you're talking about massive multiplayer games, whether it's a shooter or an MMO or whatever, then you're talking about an existent community, right, where people are sharing with other gamers in real time at a mass scale, and all the things that influence us in day-to-day life, status, excitement, friendship, community. You can get all of that in the games, often in very counterpoise to what you might have in real life, right? People can go off and be Superman for a couple of hours. Right. In those games, they get an incredible amount of excitement and rushment. They often, these days, they all created their own communities. It's only been a lot of the stuff that we built into community management actually just followed what players were actually doing in the games and the types of communities they built themselves. The first legion of community managers in all those games were just players who ended up getting tapped. They almost de facto became employees over the course of time, and then eventually some of them did just become employees because nobody in the company was doing it, and you have these people who knew the player base better than anyone else. So that's this type of stuff where community management merges into VIP is, for me, that's a really interesting thing in a lot of games that have that capability. And then there's an entire other roster of games. If you're talking about just sort of standard casual games where you're like, well, we don't have a massive multiplayer. Our players don't really connect with each other massively on scale. And a lot of those groups are looking at building out secondary community tool sets and competitions, right, where they're using Game Center or other third-party tools that you can integrate to try and simulate or add on those community levels into a game, and it can have a huge impact on retention.
Yeah, I mean, in some cases, community management is done by the community. For instance, you've got a social casino, and on the fan page is sort of where a lot of that is happening, and whether the company is driving and controlling that or not is kind of an interesting question, because if you're not driving and controlling it, you're missing a gigantic opportunity. On the other hand, you don't want to just take it over, because then the fans will go kind of hop and go somewhere else and leave you standing there. So it's that balance, and again, it's that balance between one-to-one hand holding of the VIPs, and then all of those dolphins and other payers and potential payers, and how you manage them. And like you're saying, those communities exist. It's a question of, are you aware of them, and are you helping augment them?
So you mentioned all the different levels of different players, and one thing you said earlier struck me, that it's really about knowing what a player wants to do next. What does that segment, what are you most likely to want to do next? Because that's just simply, that's what it all is, right? It's what happens next. You've got a player today. Are you going to have them tomorrow? Do you know? What can you do to kind of figure that out? What do they want to do next? I think that's a lot about what a VIP is.
So we've talked about kind of moving the needle and spending players or getting players to spend. One of the things that is slowly moving into social casino, and maybe does this affect other social mobile games in the whole, is there a operator responsibility to avoid player burnout and to kind of protect the players maybe from themselves? And being in real money regulated industry, you probably do that more, but what are they doing on social side?
Well, I can let these guys speak to some of the social. I can say there's two different categories of question there. That you talk about player burnout, right? That's certainly one issue. You have to, you can't do that. Some people would set up community events and something like that, and sometimes you can literally drive your player into the ground by overdosing them on community events, and you'd think that they would just take a break and chill out for a little while. Thing is, when they do that, you've lost them out of your cycle, and they can easily drift away. I think burnout, though, is a very different thing from where you started to talk about actually like company responsibility towards
right,
players.
Like actually probably overspending, and burning out from overspending or spending beyond your means.
Okay, well, in regulated world, obviously there's very, very different issues with that, and how, counsels and problem gambling and things like that. There are very strict rules and regulations that you have to follow, and the reality is that, players who overspend, players who have a bad time, players who, burn out, no one wants that. It's bad for you, it's horrible publicity, you've lost a player. I mean, there is absolutely no value to letting that happen.
Right.
And not only that, in the regulated market, there's serious consequences to letting that happen or being perceived to intentionally drive that. So it's a lose-lose all around. You have an incredible responsibility. I think if players are paying you, you have a responsibility to them. They are your lifeblood. So I think, yeah, at least in the regulated markets, you really have to take care of those players quite carefully.
And we're seeing it in social casino. They're self-regulating, right?
Yeah, so I mean, we, even though we don't have official regulations, I mean, so first, our VIP program is not based on sales. We don't push sales, we don't push revenue. I don't talk money with my VIPs typically. What I want to do is find out what they want, what keeps them in my game. We work on the theory that whales aren't made, they're born. So that this is a player who's going to spend money, and I want them to spend money with me. And that's why I want to build that loyalty and build that affinity. And if a player is then telling me that they have a problem or they're spending too much, I believe them. I will always believe them. And even though we're not regulated, we will always we want to do the right thing. You know, if and when regulation does come down, it will be because of bad actors. Bad actors will cause it, and bad actors will suffer. And we will not be that bad actor. Aristocrat, Product Madness is a digital arm of Aristocrat, has put together a smart social gamers resource for us and for players. You know, Aristocrat is real money gambling, real
Slot machines.
yeah, land-based slot machines. Thank you. And so, you know, this is something that as a company, you know, they've seen and they've dealt with. And so we, even though our game is really much more like Candy Crush than it is a slot machine, we try and take our cues. We want to make sure that we do right. We do right by our players.
Yeah, I mean, do social casinos have an obligation? Yeah, they do if they want to keep the players. I mean, I don't think it's an obligation so much. I think there's a moral obligation there, but I think far before you get to that line, there's an obligation of just good retention, right? If these are good players that you care about, you don't want them to burn out. I mean, it's all about, you know, game balancing and level balancing and everything else, the way you would balance anything else. Again, without naming names, I know there's a social casino out there that when a whale or a high-value player has spent up to a certain level, they just stop taking money from them, right? They just say, when you need more chips, just email us, right? Because the idea is there comes a point where taking more money from one individual player when you get up to a level like that can just be, as you said, nothing good can come of that. I mean, yes, money's good and we're all in this for profit, right? But at the same time, you know, this player, is as much a trendsetter and a great source of feedback, and to lose them because, you know, their financial advisor cut them off or something, or worse, just there's no benefit to that. So I think the social casinos, the ones I know about, if things get to that level, they take steps, and that's where it does become very one-to-one. It's like, you know, do you realize this person spent $1 gazillion with us last month, and they did 2 months before and a month before that? At some point, you have to start self-regulating that.
Is that our business? Is it our business to know what your
As long as it affects your business, it is.
See, I as well as I know my players, I don't really know their capacity, and it's not my job to set their pace. I try not to, and that goes both ways. So I don't want to set their pace, and you know, I don't want to make anything too much. You know, I don't want them to burn out. But at the same time, it's not. I mean, it's my responsibility to make sure that they're comfortable where they are. And part of the way that I do that is by not pressing them and by listening to them and really paying attention.
Yeah, I think some of this stuff just comes, you say, it's just simply a matter of good business practice, right? In the real money world, it's regulated. There are rules around what you can and can't do, and you have to be very careful. And because it's good business in social casinos, right? It's good business not just in social casino, but games in general. And to the sense where, you know, I think some people have this concept of, well, that's not our business, right? We're not going to find out. We don't need that type of, you know, responsibility for the player. Players are responsible. I'm like, well, figure it out, because you can either take responsibility for it, or there will come a time when, you know, people are going to step in and make you do so.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And
It's not about you know, not paying attention or having my fingers in my ears, but you know, at
No,
the
I'm
same
not
time,
talking about you.
but well, not me generally, but you know, there's a balance. There's definitely a balance.
If you know that Nerd Boy 1962 is Bill Gates, $20,000 is not a lot of money, and you should feel fine about that. But if you don't know, then again, it's up to the individual business. It's up to the individual community manager or marketer. I'm just saying there's definitely a level there where you have to at least start paying very close attention, right? On the other hand, who doesn't want to take the next $20,000 a month from a single player? But at some point you sort of have to figure the balance on that.
I definitely think that is going to be evolving more as we continue to grow. So we're kind of wrapping it up here, but final thoughts. Knowing that in social casino per se, that most of these players have played in a land-based casino and have seen that level of VIP or have had the travel channel tell them what they should ask for in comps. Do you think that has been a pro or a con or irrelevant to how they play in social?
I think it's a mixed bag. I think that sometimes players approach our VIP program with a sense of entitlement, as if that we're going to do things for them like a land-based casino host, which we just simply cannot do. So there's that. But on the other hand, players also understand that there's a correlation between their engagement and the reward. So that it's not a surprise to them. And I think that social casino is sort of like it's a nice bridge between land-based casino and other mobile games, because there is that logical, between, the games are similar. There's a slot machine here and a slot machine there, even though the actual game itself, the play on the social casino is much more like any other, puzzle game or anything like that. So, people definitely take those lessons with them.
I'll say, I think with all this stuff, there's a huge opportunity in leveraging VIP programs. I think there's very few people who do this at the level that you guys do.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of people who could take learning from that. There's an enormous opportunity to merge your community management system and the community-based players directly into the VIP. It's almost like a tier moving from community up through different levels, different segmentations, all the way up into personal touch VIP. I think like one of the biggest things that can impact is engagement. It's retention. When you find and define those social anchors, those people who are, whether they're VIPs by spend or by social activity, if you can keep those players, you can drive up your engagement across entire segments of players. It's hugely valuable, and I think there's a lot more that can be done to leverage it.
Well, I am excited about this topic. I'm always excited about this topic. I think that this discussion is far from over. Hopefully everybody got something out of it, and we can open it up to questions if there's any.
Any questions?
Yeah, this one's for Stephanie. You talked a lot about reaching out directly to customers and establishing one-on-one communications. I know from history that's actually a little bit of a challenge because there's not great tools for that. What are the different types of strategies you guys use to actually establish those relationships?
Honestly, we sort of leave it up to the player. Sure. We try and collect what information we can as far as an email address, or we'll even maybe try and get their phone number or something like that. Whatever information they provide for us, we'll try and reach out through that channel. And we basically, I'll follow the lead of the player if they prefer an email conversation, or or if they would like to talk on the phone, or whatever they'd like, I follow their lead.
Alex from MobilityWare. I would be interested to hear what are your thoughts on the cadence, the right cadence for communication from first communication through a year out?
I can say, just real quick, it depends. You talk about segmentation. It's going to be different for different people and for the different demographics. How do you, the particular genre of your game, your age of your player base, is email effective or is push? Do you have that capability? It's not going to be the same for an entire community of players.
What he said, but just add A/B testing to it. That's the whole idea. Is if you have a good tool set, first of all you can segment, and then second of all you can start testing it. And you can look, if it's emails, you can look at how often do they open them, right? If they start going unopened, right, or rejected, then If people start unsubscribing to the email, then you really know. So, but that's why you need a good tool set, and you need somebody whose focus it is to figure that out. And data. Well, the tool set, to me that is the data. You have to be collecting the data and then being able to sort the data, so it really is two different steps. But you really need that because you can really positively affect your business if you do those things and pay attention to those things.
From a land-based perspective, I mean, I don't know, I can't speak to frequency for that, but I can definitely tell you consistency is going to be the key to that. I mean, if you are trying to really build that relationship like she's done and like I've done in the past, it's all about that consistency. And that is what I've taken with me from those years of working in VIP casino to what I do now. And, you know, talent strategy is all about just connecting with the right people and knowing who's who and having that relationship built. And that's constantly being somewhere in their face.
The other thing, sorry, is what you're communicating. If you're communicating, gee whiz, we miss you, here's all the stuff going on this month, that might not be near as interesting as if you come tomorrow, you get some free chips. Or somewhere in between would be, we're having this massive sale right now. If you had an inclination to buy, this would be the time to do it because you can get 2 for 1. Those are very different communications, which means they're going to be received very differently as well.
Hi, Thomas Hopkins with Rocket Games. With regard to the VIP management, how do you deal with scalability? I mean, a lot of that's connected now to you two, you know, when you manage those people. I get it from a land-based space, you meet other people at a casino. How do you do that with a social casino that's 100% mobile?
It's definitely a challenge. You know, scaling the one-on-one communication is difficult. It takes a lot of prioritization and, again, following the lead of the player. You know, but we've also been able to scale beyond just those who I'm able to contact with sort of the dolphin sort of program, where to try and reach out to them on a more mass basis. You know, whether that's, you know, a mass email that goes around instead of a personal email that goes out. But, you know, try and make that personal connection without actually being one-on-one.
That's a really interesting statement. Then the idea of increasing levels of personal attention and personalization. You know, when do you move from the mass email to changing the signature to the signature of a person who's really at the company? When do you change the way that the email or the text is presented so that it becomes more of a one-to-one communication? That doesn't have to be done really on a one-to-one. It can still be one-to-many depending on segments.
I think there's still room to grow there too. I mean, you know, in a land-based world, ideally 500 people are in like a VIP manager's database, and you want to constantly fill that 500 with the best ones, whereas the number is still small in social mobile, and so I think until they reach their capacities, they're just going to continue to add people that they can grow. So.
You know, just one thing to throw in there. I mean, reaching into very different, you know, industries. You know, people know you may have all heard this thing, but the reason why you know, waiters put the smiley face on your check, because it increases your tips by 5 to 10% if you put the smiley face on your check. Right? All that is community management. It's a one-to-one personal relationship. I got 50,000 people coming in here, a couple hundred a day, but I put that little smiley face on that, and for one brief second, it creates a tiny bit of personal connection between 2 strangers who won't ever meet again, probably. And that has an impact on behavior. And I think you can do that on a mass scale.
It's an awesome place to close. So what we've learned is put smiley faces on your emails. Thanks, guys.